Hi, Paul Sankis, Good News Broadcast, speaking to Brooke Harrington. Hi, Brooke. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. You?
Okay, real well here. I study markets as social forms with a special interest in the ways a global macro structures like the market economy are enacted locally in small group interactions. Okay, your primary research question is, how do individuals perform the market? What does that mean?
Well, babies don't get born into the world, with their very own lemonade stands and cash boxes
My
ready
grandson
to go.
did. Wait a second. No, go on. I'm sorry.
Well, he's a pretty special example that I'm sure he's very special in other ways, too.
Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, thank you.
But most people have to be taught how money works, what it is, and we just come to accept, for example, that a piece of green and white paper with a long-dead president's face on it has a value of $1, and we hand over 4 or 5 of those for a cup of coffee, and a whole lot more of them for a house. And, how does that happen? But once upon a time, people used to only accept those pieces of paper if they were backed by gold or silver, which in itself, that's a socially constructed value. Why do we decide that gold and silver have value as a medium of exchange and not, shells like the American Indians and their wampum, or cattle, the way many tribes in Africa do? That's the money there. In prisoner of war camps, they use cigarettes and tins of Spam or bars of chocolate. So just about anything could be used as a medium of exchange, but we've sort of made a social compact that most people don't even realize they've signed on to accept little pieces of paper that say, "In God we trust," that aren't backed by any kind of metal or any sort of solid assets at all. We accept them as having value.
Hey, Brooke, I like the way you think here. This is very basic to start off with, but I believe that you get a little bit more involved. So once we realize that somebody's printing this stuff, and that there is, though, potentially something behind the stuff that they print, right?
We hope.
And I am in bewilderment, actually, about it all, because I love the reality that it used to be a gold standard, and now we don't know what standard it is, I don't think, completely. So what has brought you to, what made you think about something like this?
Well, I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago where many of my friends' fathers were traders on the Chicago Board of Trade. And if you've ever seen pictures of that involves a big trading pit where there are masses of middle-aged men, mostly white guys, stuffed very close together, wearing colorful jackets and shrieking at each other at the top of their lungs and making cryptic hand signals. It's like something you would see on National Geographic or the Animal Planet. It's completely mysterious, and I was pretty much transfixed by that as a kid, and I wondered what the heck they were doing. And then I wrote my very first term paper, I think in 6th grade, on the market crash of 1929, just because that kind of stuff was in the air in Chicago. And then I took a few detours. I went off to Stanford and was an English literature major and thought I wanted to be a journalist. But I was bothered by the fact that I couldn't really go in depth on things, and I felt very uncomfortable knowing that I was writing stories about things I didn't really understand because the stories had to be written on deadline. So way back in the day, this was during the period of, say, the BCCI scandal, which some of your listeners may recall from the early 90s, I was basically rewriting press releases about those trials and realizing that I had no clue what I was writing about. And it bothered my conscience. It bothered my brain that I didn't know what I was talking about. And I ended up going back to graduate school in organizational behavior at Harvard. And despite what people say about the ivory tower nature of higher education, I really think it's one of the most practical things I ever did. I learned a lot of very important lessons about, what some people like to call the real world, power, group dynamics, how people make decisions. I needed it to be spelled out for me, and that's really what graduate school did. And on the way, I learned that there was a whole field that involved studying the crazy stuff people do with their money. And that was closely allied with organizations, because, of course, corporations do a lot of the money moving in the world. And I just fell in love with this field and decided to make it my life's work.
Now you, though, had an opportunity to write a whole book, right?
That's right.
Pop Finance, is that
Yes.
what it's called?
Mm-hmm.
Investment Clubs and the Investor Populism.
It's basically about the movement that's brought most of Americans, people who never had anything to do with the stock market before, into the market as investors, often for the first time. So it's not just about investment clubs, it's about the changes in our society and our economy that have made investing a mainstream thing.
I'm sure they're really happy about that right now. I'm sure they're jumping up and down. Why? I did such a smart thing. I went into the stock market. Stock market is a risky thing. Stock market, I was taught by my Uncle Irving early on that the stock market, if you can afford, this is what Uncle Irving said, he was the president of a big company, if you can afford to lose the money, gamble.
Uh-huh.
What do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, I'm living the nightmare as we speak, along
Right.
with probably many of your listeners.
Right.
I think probably in your Uncle Irving's time, it was probably more possible to rely on things like a pension from your employer when you retired, or a Social Security system that would be solvent by the time you retired.
Okay.
There were more things that you could count on in your old age. You didn't have to do it all yourself. But what's happened in the last about 30 years is that, first of all, a lot of companies don't offer any pensions anymore.
Interesting, right?
And those that do have shifted all the risk and responsibility to employees, so that you have to decide for your 401k how much of your pre-tax income to set aside and where to put it in a menu of investment options offered by your employer. Now, so many people find even that relatively simple task daunting that a full 25% of them who have the opportunity just don't invest, period, because it's complicated to learn how much to invest and where. So a lot of people who probably would rather not be invested in the stock market are, because they have no choice.
Interesting. The first person ever to say this to me. Thank you. I never thought of that. In other words, and I've been out of corporate America for a long time, 23 years, into my own corporation, and we've never had enough money to pay people with that kind of 401k kind of thing, and so on and so forth. In fact, we haven't had enough money even to pay the people, and so, but they stayed here, many of them, for many years because they believe in good news broadcast, and so I've never had that, but I'm praying right now that someone's going to maybe invest in us, right? And that I can do what CBS did for me and PBS Channel 13 did for me, and gave me a retirement matching retirement fund. That in the old days, they're 72-ish starting in business. That was just standard operating procedure, right?
Right.
But you're saying that there are corporations out there, like the top Fortune 100 companies don't give benefits?
A lot of them don't. One of the real changes of the last couple of years is increasing hiring of temporary and part-time workers to whom no benefits are owed, or companies who are just straight up reneging on their pension agreements. I mean, those are big obligations for companies. Like the auto companies are sinking partly under those kind of benefit agreements. And, some people just blame the unions, and I'm not a scholar of union and labor relations, so it may be that unions are partially at fault here. But one of the reasons, say, that Japanese companies, like Japanese automakers, aren't looking at the end of the line for themselves is because the Japanese government does a lot of the things that right now American corporations are supposed to do for American employees, like provide health care services and provide old age benefits. So I was talking last week over dinner with two of my friends who are in the financial services industry. One of whom was a trader on the New York Stock Exchange. The other is an investment manager, and they're not liberals by any stretch of the imagination, but they are very informed and they're very pragmatic. And what they had to say was simply, if if our government were to provide more of a safety net, corporations could do their jobs better. Because right now corporations are being asked to do things that, A, they aren't very good at because they're not compatible with maximizing shareholder value or profit. And B, there's no way to be competitive in a world market where companies like GM and Ford and Chrysler have to compete with companies whose obligations to workers are pretty much limited to things like paying them a salary instead of also providing for their health care and retirement as our companies are. So I said to my friends, are you telling me that like socialism will save capitalism? I mean, and I was exaggerating because any talk of a nationalized health care system tends to be greeted in some circles in the U.S. as, godless socialism. But really, that is in fact a strategy that's worked to keep a lot of healthy capitalist societies alive.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm a socialist of sorts. I think everybody should have everything, but that's a whole nother. I think I don't believe in countries. I'm a John Lennonist, and so for real. And I speak about it a lot. I don't believe in countries and borders and any of that kind of stuff. I think it's all segregation, and in addition, it's a fake. It's not true. Nobody said that this was our land, this land was your land, this land's mine. It's everybody's land. Every part of it all. We're all brothers and sisters. We're all Homo sapiens, and we're part of the same clan. No matter whatever we want to say, the fact is we all have the same blood.
That's an interesting way of putting it. The film The English Patient had a lot of good stuff about that. How absurd it is to have national boundaries.
Well, what is an investment club?
Well, it's sort of do-it-yourself financial self-help for first world countries. And I say it's for first world countries because it has a very strong analogous relationship to things you hear about in the third world, in developing countries, like microfinance, rotating credit associations, for example. I think it was a year ago that a guy named Muhammad Yunus won the Nobel Peace Prize for promoting microfinance through the Grameen Bank. And we think of those sort of grassroots movements of people building up their economic position as something that only happens in developing countries. But part of the reason that investment clubs, which are also small grassroots groups of people who are trying to build up their financial position, not so much for present-day survival, but typically for retirement, the reason that caught fire in the U.S. when it did in the 90s was partly because we shredded our own safety net so badly that in a way we turned ourselves into a developing country, or we undeveloped ourselves to the point where people felt that they had no choice but to try investing on their own because they couldn't rely on their employers or on the government to provide for them in old age.
Do you know about zaibatsus? You know about Japan and what's it in Korea? That's government working with like 5 or 6 families, the major families of the country.
I believe in Korea they're called chaebol.
Chaebol, that's it, chaebol, right? Sort of like the government and the largest families partnered,
right?
And then everybody worked for the company store.
Yeah,
or many people.
Yeah.
And that was the way of conducting business. Thusly, they did pretty well with that kind of a concept, right? I mean, Japan, a little country, is in essence, with this world of economics, is supposedly the number 2 country is up there, right?
Right.
As a powerful business organization. So, I had a feeling I could talk to for a long time. So, but why don't we make this like part 1?
Okay.
Of part 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so and maybe next time we do it in video in our TV studio here in New York, recycled TV studio.
Oh, wonderful! Well, I do actually get to New York pretty frequently just because I have meetings and so forth there.
Good. All right. Well, let me ask you one last question.
Yeah.
And then we'll take it from there. First, and mention that you have a a website, right? It's under your own name, BrookeHarrington.com, and we'll link over to that. Your book is called Pop Finance, Investment Clubs and New Investor Populism, which can be purchased.
At Amazon.com, the usual way, or through Princeton University Press, who's the publisher.
Okay. So then my last question is, so for you personally, what is good news?
About the market or in general?
Anything you want it to be.
What a great question.
This is Good News Broadcast. We like good news.
Europe is going to forgive us for what they perceive as our destruction of the world economy because we elected Barack Obama.
Okay. A local boy does good.
Yes.
From Hawaii, though.
Yeah, but the headlines in the European papers the day after the election were kind of touching. I mean, there's an admiration for America and democracy that I have never seen in my lifetime. I've read about it in other parts of history, but the pretty much universal point that the international papers made was it couldn't happen here. That is, in Europe or in China or wherever, that someone who comes from a marginalized status group like African Americans or people of mixed racial heritage, someone who has a comparable position in German society or in Japanese society, they wouldn't stand a chance in politics. And we elected this guy president of the United States. And so there was a lot of kind of admiration and congratulation of the United States in the international papers. And I've always been proud to be an American, but it was a day where I could feel that other people understood why I was proud.
Okay. Well, I thank you for sharing. I'll just add one thing, just because I'm calling up his like PR person right now through good friends, and we were supposed to interview him before, but he got so busy, Barack Obama, and so I'm calling them, and hopefully now we're going to get an interview with him. But I think it's also good to know that he didn't win by much. He only won by 5 or 6 million votes out of 350 million or out of 100 plus million. And I'm only saying that because, and I voted for him, but I'm only saying that because it's still interesting, because if you go with consensus, and I'm sort of a consensus kind of person, worldwide consensus, like my consensus is get rid of all the countries, but besides that, is that that's important to know too, that there was at least half, 5 million in my mind is still half, thought highly of him and half thought highly of the Republican John McCain. It's good in that sense. I mean, to just understand, to think about that. So maybe he and I think what I'm excited about is I think he understands that. In fact, he met with McCain yesterday, and I was actually hoping that he would put him in his cabinet. So I don't know. I just thought I would throw that out. I don't really talk too much about politics because of my worldly, that kind of opinion. But that would be in my mind. In fact, I thought they should run together and not even have an election initially. But I don't know. I just thought I'd throw my 2 cents in. I apologize because I asked you what's your good news, and I should have left it at that. But
it's fun. I like having a conversation.
Because I don't usually talk about it, because politics, something. Isn't it something about it though? It's wild that people get so connected to it, and isn't it? It
has to do with people's idea of who is deserving of help and who isn't deserving of help. And it's their value system, what they think is meritorious and what is not. And so it's hard, if you disagree with someone's politics, it's hard not to take it personally and feel judged, because probably you yourself would come out pretty badly on their value scale.
Oh, another good point. Hey, this is a smart person. And Brooke, you're a smart person with an E at the end of the Brooke.
Why, thank you. So you're not going to call Harvard and have them repossess my diploma?
No, not at all. I don't know their number. Thanks a lot. I appreciate taking the time and speaking with us, and I look forward to meeting you.
It was great talking to you.
Take care, Brooke. Bye-bye.